Hello and welcome to Movies, Films, and Flicks. I am Mark DBS, and joining me is a man who's a true grinder who burps onions. It's Phil Briggs.
Yo, what's going on? Are we going to spend the entire time talking about pierogies and snow and stuff like that? Because I'm ready for it.
I mean, if you had a poker name, what would it be? So I'm Mark DBS. You know, there's like Teddy KGB. I'm Mark DBS, Mark D Blue C. What would yours? I was also thinking I'd be like Mark Croissant because, Joey Knish. And then there was another guy, Joey Bagels, who they based the Knish on.
Right.
So,
yeah, he had the bagel delivery route.
Yeah.
Dude, okay, let me think into my. Okay, so the first thing that comes to mind, right, is when we were growing up and everybody started getting their first email address. Like, I don't know what your first email address was and whether it's as embarrassing as mine, but I'm pretty sure mine was something like lucky_charms, and charms was spelled with a Z at hotmail.com, of course. So something like, if I could go like, Phil Lucky Charms with a Z Briggs. I've got I'm an Irish background as well, so it ties in with that, and like just the luck in poker. I think Lucky Charms.
Lucky Charms with a Z. Everyone has.
And then I could go for the over-the-top Irish accent to try to rival Malkovich's over-the-top Russian accent, and just accent back and forth. It'd be amazing.
I just want to sit there and watch this table. You with just a wildly comical Irish accent, and then Malkovich. I love reading about Malkovich on this. I sent you that oral history from The Ringer, but it makes me so happy that when they were talking about, like, John Dahl was on set. You had the writers on set. You had David Levy and Brian Koppelman, who do Billions. Like, they're flying. Also, John Dahl has since directing this, he's directed pretty much every episode of shows you love. Like, he's done.
I noticed that as well. It's a lot of great TV credits for sure.
It's like and he's actually worked with these writers too. He worked on Billions, like, which they produce, so like they've kept their relationship alive. Like Yellowstone, like I feel like, and you know what? I like Dexter. He did 16 of those. Oh, have you seen this? Yeah, I did 3. What I love too is they're on set with John Malkovich, and they were like, he's like, I do remember a conversation that John and certainly Brian and David and a few of us had where we sort of debated whether or not we would talk to him about his accent. The consensus is that we should let it go. First of all, he clearly put a lot of work into it. Second of all, it's not like we were sitting around going, this is terrible. It really was a question of, is this too much? And then he wrote, it was a funny moment to actually contemplate. Do we need to have an intervention with one of the greatest actors on the planet?
Yeah, I guess when like the first couple of takes that he did it, like I guess like him and Matt Damon kind of like, locked eyes, like kind of, and I guess sort of non-verbally, Matt's face was sort of like, what are you doing? Like, what is happening here? And I guess Malkovich kind of like said to him like, oh yeah, like sometimes I'm a pretty terrible actor or something along those lines. Like, as I guess he was trying to, find a voice, and maybe, I mean, I don't know how it could have been any more over the top than what it ends up being in the final cut. But I guess even maybe it took him a little bit to find what ended up being the final version of Teddy KGB.
Just niet. Yeah, he won, like, fair and square. Like, you're just going, like, this is... But you know what? After watching Rounders again, I watched this in 98, because, listen, you and I talked about this during Fight Club, but I was a big Norton fan,
Yeah, this is like Norton, like, really in, I was going to say in his prime, but, like, this is really more his kind of coming out party in and around this time.
Yeah.
But maybe in hindsight, this is sort of like the best period of Norton's career, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, listen, you had Primal Fear, you had American History X, Rounders, Death to Smoochie. Like, he was putting in some really interesting work, Fight Club. Yeah. And then you had good old Matt Damon, who was like white hot after Good Will Hunting. I mean, we're talking like he had the heat. he was super hot. And so I think when they made that, he didn't have that heat when it was coming out. And so I can see why Rounders initially flopped, but then opinion turned for it later as it traveled further down the river. I'm very proud of that. That's like a good Texas Hold'em reference. But yeah, because I was talking to Megan, my wife, about this, and I was like, listen, there's no violence. There's no wildly dramatic hands. There's violence, but there's no, like, gun violence. There's no romance in it. It's actually a breakup movie. There's, no one really dies in it, it's people remain quite logical. When Teddy loses, he's like, all right, get out of here. I lost. Like, you won. Peace. It's people are speaking the truth. Martin Landau drops monologues. So I think if you're in there going, man, like Good Will Hunting, that awesome, like Minnie Driver and him. And I remember when Rounders, I was 16, and the Gretchen Mol, she was in a lot of the publicity for this movie in the trailers. She's in a lot of it. And you're like, oh, okay, so this is like a poker player falls in love and like goes on and has a dirtbag friend named Worm. But it's really not that at all. I mean, Worm's horrible and just disappears. It's like, it's a really odd movie, but long story short, I think this movie is such a cult classic is because of John Malkovich, man. Like, Damon's good in it, but he's just chill. Like, Worm is a spectacular idiot, but he just sort of disappears towards the end. But I think when people talk about this movie, it's the Oreos and the poker and Malkovich, right?
And the quotes, man, like for a long time. So I didn't see it when it first came out. I was introduced to this movie in and around the time of the poker boom, like the 2003, 2004 Chris Moneymaker, World Series of Poker on ESPN and all of that. And it was like, probably Googling like what are the best poker movies. And what's interesting is like poker sort of shows up in a lot of movies and a lot of westerns and things like that, but maybe notoriously is like the actual poker playing itself is pretty terrible. It's like, oh, my royal flush beats your four of a kind, and it's like totally crazy and unrealistic. And this movie's like the poker itself in it is so perfect and so realistic in a lot of ways, and all the terminology that they use, like they really didn't dumb it down at all. They just expect you to sort of figure it out and catch up and learn what's going on. And like to your point about all of those maybe stereotypical elements that you might expect from a movie like this on the surface, it doesn't include any of that. And instead, what they really seem to focus on is building out this world that probably at the time most people didn't even really realize existed, like these underground poker clubs where there are these real people that are the Joey Bagels of the world that are people that they wanted to shine a light on and sort of say, like, look at this kind of crazy world that exists underneath the surface that a lot of people don't even maybe realize is there.
Yeah, it was, Edward Norton said that he lived in New York his entire life, and he didn't even know these things existed. Right. It's just that, and he also said that the nice thing about them is that there weren't really criminals there. You were just betting. People took the guns away, so you're pretty safe. The cops, they were wired. If they ever got busted, the cops would be right there. So it was he said it was the best world to be in because you weren't getting involved with organized crime, but you were also gambling. So it was kind of a high. He's like, that's the world you want to get into. And I remember watching, just feeling that thrill. And, when I saw this when I was 16, I wasn't playing poker yet, but when I went to college, poker was getting big. So we would have 12 people together and we would just play Texas Hold'em. When I moved back to St. Pete, my friends Zach Beckler and John Lazavath, who was the first host of this show, and Zach has been a guest on this. He's now directing cool horror movies. We would play for Blu-rays. And then when I was getting my master's, I would have a game with like 6 people, but we would all get a $5 bad movie. And then the winner took all of them home, like, because we didn't want to play for much cash. And so, I even went to poker, like Vegas, and I played a little bit, but I was never that good because these dudes can sit down for 72 hours. My attention span goes in 4 minutes. And if you've played game night with me, Phil, I let it ride. Like, I don't have you know what? I'm going to sit this one out.
Just come in and create the chaos.
Yeah, I come in and I create the chaos, and I either blow up spectacularly, or I'll be down to the final 2. I'll have 99% of the chips, and then I'll lose my attention span, start making dumb moves, and I lose it all towards the end. Like, that's the way I play poker. So, yeah, I don't think I could ever be a grinder like Kanish in this movie, because I was just... But I also never played for $7,000, $15,000. I was playing to maybe win or lose in the Army Now with Pauly Shore. So yeah, I guess I never like cared too much. And also when I was playing poker in Tallahassee, when I was at Florida State University, we were playing for like $10 buy-in. And some people, man, they took it so seriously. Sure, you could walk out of there with $80, but to not talk to anybody for 5 hours, to wear glasses, and like, Phil, if you and I are hanging out, dude, we see each other once a month, and I just stare at you, like, that's not I don't know. That wasn't fun, but I still love poker, and we always would talk about rounders, man. Like rounders is just what we have. Like no one talked about Maverick, no one talked about those gambling scenes, but just talking about KGB. If someone had an Oreo, they would kind of make a joke to listen to something, and it just like, it was just rushing at. I once played a game of cards with my grandma, and I used like KGB's accent most of the time. So it was the movie kind of sunk into me a lot more than I realized.
Well, and that's like to your point about Malkovich. So going back to what we were saying, like I agree with you that for all that Matt Damon, the rocket ship is taking off at this point. Edward Norton is at the peak of his powers. It really is Malkovich that's like the most memorable part of this movie. Like I can remember renting this from Blockbuster on DVD, which was the first time that I ever saw it. And as the store clerk was like, scanning me through and handing it to me, he said, he dropped pay that man his money, like on the way out. Like that's the thing that everybody remembers. And I couldn't play a poker game without somebody dropping a Teddy KGB quote, every single time there's a raise, it's always, very aggressive. Yeah. I'm going to try and get all my impressions out in the first 10 minutes of this conversation. Very aggressive, kids got alligator blood. Like that's that's rounders for me, man, is the Malkovich lines.
I will splash the pot when I can't even do it whenever I please. That's why I think this movie is, because the writers in that oral history they talked about, just they knew poker, they analyzed poker, they used the terms, they went to a basement and just wrote this film. So I think it's quite authentic. There's plenty of speeches. That's why you get Turturro, dude. You get Norton, you get Landau. What a cast for this movie. And John Dahl, he had done The Last Seduction, he had done Red Rock West, he had done a bunch of music videos before this, but he was hot at the time. So they said that the script was actor bait, because they read it and like Edward Norton said he took it because of the conversation about the mom. Like, why did he hate me? Because you hooked up with his mom. Well, she was a really attractive older woman.
Yeah.
He took this entire script from that, and it's just. But like watching this again, Worm is such Worm disappears. Like Worm is gone in this movie, and all Worm does is it's a yin and yang for sure. But he's just such an idiot. But he can't stop. Like that's the addiction. That's the rush. So you have the grinders, but then you have the people who have legitimate gambling addiction problems. So I think they showed the good and bad of gambling. Like, listen, poker's not just luck. It's not, it's the cards, you know who has what, you see the flop, you see the turn, you see the river, or you kind of can guess what people have, who's folding. Luck, sure, it's involved, but you play the player, sometimes you play the cards. But Mike in this movie is such a scientific guy, right? He's just sort of, I know the numbers, I can grind. But Worm is the one with the addiction. But Worm is so shisty, dude. When he goes in with the municipal workers and he just wrecks the game. But I don't think he can help himself.
It's another great line when he walks in too and he says, "Oh, whoa, that's a hell of an elk." I don't know why, but it just cracks me up every single time he says that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been thinking about this after watching the movie again for the first time in a little while and thinking about their relationship, because I think I would have said prior to the most recent rewatch that Worm is this sort of lovable troublemaker, that he's the lovable friend who gets you into trouble, but because he's your friend and you love him, you kind of put up with it. And watching it this most recent time, I was sort of no, man, Worm is an idiot. Just why is Mike McD still friends with this guy? Why is he showing up, when Worm's getting out of prison? And I guess, as I think about it, love to hear your opinion on this. I guess it's those early years where they're the only two kids in the private school. And they're there because their dads, are on the staff there, and they're the poor kids that probably get picked on and beat up, and and they're running scams on people together, and they're trying to survive together, right? And there's lots of cool books. If you've ever read anything by Sebastian Junger that talks about people going through difficult experiences together, soldiers going through war together, the bond that creates between people is something that really can, last and stand the test of time. And so I wonder if it's just one of those things, like maybe I'm reading too deeply into it, but it's like the connection that those guys have, maybe it's like no matter how badly Worm screws up, I mean, he ends up in prison and Mike is still there for him, tells him that he wishes he could have come and visited him, more when he was in prison. I don't know. What do you think about their relationship? Like, why is Mike McD friends with Worm?
One thing I love that Norton said was that he's like, this is a guy that you don't become friends with. He's like, this is a guy that you're friends with because he knew him when he was younger. Right. And I think that's a great point. But also, Mike also knew that Worm was an abused child. Worm's dad smacked him around, and no one told him he could win. Like, everyone told him he was nothing. And so, you have Mike, the poor kid in the school. You have kind of the cast off of the school. I think maybe Mike had a very protective thing over Worm, but here's the thing, man, like when Worm was younger and you have an abusive parent, you don't have much guidance. You kind of you might do the rackets, like you might hustle because you don't have anybody telling you what's right or wrong. You're not like, you don't really have that moral compass because you have no one to give you that moral compass. So I think, Mike was always down to clown, but like Worm took it too far. And I think Worm probably, got expelled. Mike stayed in, then eventually Worm went to jail. But I think you have that guilt. You think, friends from early on, Worm got his back. And I just think that, but the problem with those two is when you're younger in high school, man, like you can put up with a shady friend because, his dad's terrible. It's this, you can make excuses for him. But when the world gets real, man, when you get involved with KGB, when you get involved with grandma, when like real violence is there, and when the person won't stop doing what they're doing, that's when you have to create the distance. But I think Mike goes to pick him up because you have the guilt, you have the friend. I mean, he hadn't seen him in years. So it had to have been a strong bond between these two. And also there's guilt involved. And I mean, Worm's a hustler, man. But what's interesting too, everyone around him senses this like unhealthiness about him. Mm-hmm. All the poker players. You can they feel like he's like an energy vampire who just drains people of their lifeblood. And so I think Mike has those walls and excuses up about him. Oh, you don't understand him. He's a good guy. But eventually he realizes, oh man, this dude's bad.
And I think that there's part of, I think part of Mike's, character and the story that we're seeing with him is that he's, he loves the game. He's an artist to a certain degree, right? He feels alive at the card table playing straight up. There's a part of him, I think, that probably, really enjoyed running the scams with Worm. That first scene where they go when Worm gets out of prison and they go to the frat house or whatever and they're playing the game there, and he's describing, right away, Worm and I fall right into our old rhythm. We're Clyde Frazier and Earl the Pro Monroe, and we're doing all these things just like we used to that would never fly in the city. So there's a bit of like, going back to sort of your old life and your old ways, and he's maybe getting a little bit of a thrill out of that. But I totally agree. It's like once it gets to a point where he maybe realizes that Worm is who he is, and he's going to be that way forever. He's never going to change. He's never going to grow up. And I think that there's a part of Mike that's kind of like that push and pull to a certain degree where, there's the appeal of the way that they used to do things and some of the good times and the thrills that they probably used to have together. But he also wants to like pursue his dream and, become like kind of like a better version of himself and that sort of things. And maybe Worm's a bit of an anchor, against that in some ways. So anyway, it's kind of interesting thinking about their relationship.
Like he's the friend where, when you're young and you're being rambunctious, you're like, let's go knock over porta potties. But then you have a friend who breaks a window and you're like, what? Why? Like it's always like the one person who takes it too far, and that's Worm. And he definitely has some, Arrested Development, I would say, in his character. And he's, he's just a squirrely guy. Also, this is really random, but Norton played a lot of basketball in the early 90s, man. American History X, Rounders, and then Keeping the Faith. I just want to get that out there. A lot of basketball Norton's playing. I don't know what that theme is, but I just wanted to say that real quick because it just dawned on me because the scene inside the church, which I really liked. I almost ran out of breath there, Phil. Did you hear that? I was like, I'm going to finish this sentence instead of breathing. But, I think he's just that friend, and I don't think they really explore it that much in this movie. But, it's interesting that Norton took this role because nothing's learned. Nothing is, like, I don't think Mike even learns anything this time, just that he loves poker. So he went big. he lost. He's like, oh shucks, I'm done. And then he kind of quit. He drove the truck or the Knish truck around. He doesn't pack the truck really well, but then he drives the truck around, and then I think eventually he realizes, oh, I love poker. I'm gonna go make this happen. I'm gonna try to make it happen at least. But it's an I don't know, man. It's an interesting movie. Also, I think my favorite scene though is, aside from Martin Landau's talks, Abe Petrowski, like I really like what Joey Knish has to say about kind of being a man and taking your risk and like being a coward. And he's like, listen, I got kids, I got alimony. I can't blow 30,000. I'm here to hustle. I'm here to make money. This is a job. And so I think this movie does a good job of sort of deconstructing masculinity to a certain extent. And that's kind of rare for a late 90s movie, which doesn't do it that much, or just men and, people in general in this world. Like, I don't know. I just thought that was interesting. Like,
no, I totally agree. I think about this kind of thing all the time, right? Where it's like a lot of the message out there in the culture is that you should pursue your dreams or pursue the things that you're passionate about. It's hard, right? Like, especially like as a young guy, when I was, growing up and thinking, okay, I'm going to try and make a life for myself here. What are the things that I'm passionate about? And at the time, as an 18-year-old, it's like I'm passionate about playing video games. Actually, I was probably at the time passionate about playing poker. It's funny, man. I can remember actually sending Daniel Negreanu, the professional poker player, an email. He had this really cool website back like when I was 18 or 19, and a cool blog, and would talk a lot about his various adventures at the casinos and gambling, playing golf and things like that. And anyway, and so he cool Canadian, very successful poker player. And I can remember emailing him saying like, I'm a young guy, I'm trying to figure out what to do with my life. Like, I love poker. Like, should I try to pursue this? Like, tell me, what would you tell like a young person like this? And to his credit, he not only emailed me back, I actually think he gave me some pretty good advice, which was, being a professional poker player is a very, very hard life, not for everybody, and probably don't do it if you can avoid it. And so, but it's an interesting thing to think about, because this movie is a great example. I think the thing you said earlier, you don't think Mike learns anything. I mean, I think the thing that if he learns anything, it's the professor's speech, which is kind of, if there's something that you love and there's something that you're passionate about, there's probably a reason for that. He says something like, our destinies choose us. Like, you're good at this thing for a reason, so you probably should dedicate your time and effort and energy towards it. And in fact, the professor, like, in a crazy decision, like, gives his like gambling law student $10,000. Like, that's how much he believes in that, I guess. And it's interesting though to contrast that with like, well, no, like, part of growing up is, taking responsibility and figuring out how to, provide for yourself, and once you get married and have kids, how to, provide for a family and really look after other people and things like that. And so it's kind of, it's an interesting thing to think about. This is certainly like an inspiring, like, sports style movie about somebody pursuing their dreams. But I like the Joey Knish character that's maybe the grinder, a little bit more realistic, isn't taking the big risks, maybe isn't pursuing his dream necessarily. But he says, he's like, I've got the playbook, like, I laid it all out for you, Mike. So I don't know, it's an interesting contrast in characters for sure.
And it's nuts. Do you think in around 2003, when poker was just blowing up, that players like that made bank? Because you know how many people stepped up to play poker after that. I bet you tournaments got huge. Like, I went to Vegas in 2006, and when I was there, I was waiting for a UFC. It was what? Arlovsky Sylvia 3. It was Tito Ortiz, Ken Shamrock 3.
Okay.
Joe Stevens. It was one of the worst cards in the history.
I feel like those are both really terrible fights, if I remember correctly.
Frank Mir's comeback fight. Joe Stevenson was in a fight. It was one of the worst cards that you could possibly imagine. But I entered a poker tournament with about 40 people, and I had my greatest poker moment ever. And then I lost my attention span. I blew out amazingly. Like, people, must have been a roller coaster at the table I was at. Like, I pissed the guy off. Like, I took him all in. I had like a pair of twos, but I just read them for some reason. And he had nothing. He's like, you went in on a pair of twos? You went in on a pair? And he just lost his mind. I took all his chips. And then I think I just have such I don't know, it's not my attention span, because I sit there and I can do research for 10 hours. But I think at the poker table, I just kind of got reckless. And
Yeah.
like I made some huge like up and downs, and people were like, "What is going on over here?" Then eventually I just got taken all in and I lost. But I never would have won that thing to begin with. But yeah, I mean, I bet you the tables weren't like that. You know, I bet you they were ringers making a lot more money. I wonder if Knish made more money after 2003 rolls around when the sport blew up. Does that make sense? Like, I wonder.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I'm just looking back even. I just tried to quickly look up like some of the history of like the prize pools in some of the tournaments, right? And so like when Chris Moneymaker won the main event back in 2003, it's not even on the list anymore of the
Wow.
largest prize pools in poker tournaments. I think he won, I want to say like, a couple of $1 million. Well, then you fast forward years later, Greg Raymer wins the 2004, so that's the next year. The first prize is $5 million. And then later on, you go all the way to, where was it here? Jamie Gold in 2006 wins the first prize, and it's $12 million. So the money that is going into these tournaments, like you said, the amount of players that are entering, it's like, I don't know if you still follow poker at all. I still kind of, I was like deep into it, playing a lot, going to the casino the odd time and playing as well, and then kind of stopped for a long time. I found recently I'm getting back into it a little bit and kind of casually following what's been happening. And the World Series of Poker main event now, they have like it's like a week-long event. They have so many people enter. They do staggered day one entries. Like they can't even have everybody play their first day of the tournament. They don't have enough space in the casino for it. So they'll do day 1A, day 1B, day 1C, and then kind of whittle things down. And so it is kind of funny because the idea that they talk about in rounders, like the same 5 guys making the final table every single year, that definitely is not what happens anymore, just because it's such a gigantic field of players. Sure, a lot of the pros, probably have a pretty good chance and make it pretty far a lot of the time, but it's way more random now in terms of who makes it to the finals.
Yeah, just so many people. The sport is just the game is just blown up. It's it used to be kind of hustling. I don't know, but yeah. Well, this is really random about the like poker. I feel like poker, yes, like if you go to a casino a lot, you can burn. There is gambling addiction. You could burn your money. But I think everyone started sort of appreciating the numbers of poker. Like I think in the 90s, you didn't look at poker as reading another person or catching the cards. Some did, sure, but I think the majority of the population. So when you have Matt Damon, who was just in Good Will Hunting as this great mathematician, talking about playing the player and counting the cards and knowing this and just you're like, oh, there's a science to it. You read the player, you go all in. There's a strategy. It's almost like a game of chess, but with money. And I think that kind of blew my mind because, when you think about gambling, like I love movies like Mississippi Grind, and there are a lot of like not degenerate. There's a lot of people who are really addicted to gambling and really have a hard time backing away. But this was a different world, man. Like I think it was odd to see like a gambling card world that wasn't shady, if that makes sense. Like it's like they infiltrated games and made them shady, like Worm did. Like it was, I don't know. I kind of dig how it presented poker. And I think maybe that's where my sort of love came from. It's just sort of reading people. Well, for like 20 minutes, I lost most games, but it just didn't, I don't know. I felt like poker was always sort of like bad people. Like, and you watch a Western and there's a table where people play poker and one of them gets shot. Like before this, we had maybe Tombstone, which had some fun cards. We had Maverick. I can't think of Austin Powers. James Bond, right? Of course. But
I also like to live dangerously.
But I also see why this movie didn't fully blow up, right? Because it's very down to earth, right? It's very, you watch Casino Royale, Royal Flush, 4 of a kind, straight, high flush, like full house in one hand. And so I think that's where the tension comes from. But this one, just like even the initial hand when he had a pair of aces over a full house, like he had the aces.
Nines against aces. That's full house. Yeah,
that's the one hand that could have beaten Mike. So it's interesting watching Mike. Like I got beat by Teddy. Like Teddy beat me, but like a statistical anomaly beat, but still Teddy bet great. Like he did a great job. But I kind of, I don't know, I just dig this, like, I feel like this was written by people who love poker. This wasn't like, let's say poker gets big and then you get 8 poker movies. They're not going to be good. This felt like was written with love and care, and they actually brought in real players. So it's, yeah, I think it's an interesting movie, man. It's a lot different from what I remember. Worm is much more of a non-existent character. I think Landau back in the day when I was 16, I probably thought he was like the most boring part, but now I listen to his speeches, I'm like, this dude's great.
Yeah.
And Malkovich is amazing as always. It's just, yeah.
And Turturro really stood out for me this time too. Like again, that scene that you mentioned where they're talking about where Joey Knish won't give him the money because he knows even if he gives him a couple of grand, he's just going to be wasting it. Such a strong and kind of understated acting performance. I really love that for sure. Just an incredible cast. Such a fun movie. It was interesting too that I read somewhere that it was only in theater for 3 weeks.
Yeah. I looked it up on Box Office Mojo, and it went from like 8 million to 4 million to 2 million, and then the fourth week was next to nothing. It was gone. And this was released in September. This wasn't released in August or July. I mean, this movie did not. I mean, oh wow, it's 7.3 on IMDb. That's high. But it's too practical, dude. Like, sorry, Phil. Like, I started to call you dude, but it's too. There's no Mel Gibson getting a bunch of aces. Like, does that make sense? Like, it's and then at the end, KGB just goes, you won. It's cool. Like, like you got me. I'm gonna go in a room and sulk for a little bit. I'll come back stronger.
Yeah, 100%. And what I like about it though too is like it is very authentic to poker at the time, and it introduced the idea of like, yeah, you're playing against your opponent. Like it is very much like a sports movie. It's people competing against each other. You're playing the man. You're watching the man when the cards come out. I love too when that scene with the judges when at the very beginning when he goes in and they're all playing. And he just grabs the professor's chips and just starts betting his professor's money. He's like, I just can't help myself. What's interesting is like poker to a certain degree has like evolved even away from that. It's less about tells and playing the other person. You sort of said earlier about it largely being about math now, and it really has evolved to the point where like a lot of pros are using sequence randomizers and things like that. And there's this concept called GTO, game theory optimal, where they basically have a computer essentially, run analysis on what the optimal play is from a game theory perspective. And the idea is that as opposed to saying like, when you have this hand and in this, like kind of different from chess where like in this situation, this is the correct move that you're supposed to do. I think the idea with like game theory optimal play is you're supposed to sort of mix, do a variety of different things in certain situations to kind of mask the type of play that you're doing so that people can't profile you as a player. So it's a long way from listening to the Oreo and that being your tell to the point where, people are trying to basically play like they are computer simulators. And it's really become super, super math heavy, which is kind of interesting. Maybe less entertaining, and probably a movie about people trying to simulate, to play like math simulators is probably a lot less interesting than this, where we're reading each other and watching for tells and that sort of thing.
Oh god, that sounds wonderful and terrible. I don't think I could play poker with those people, but there is a certain fun to reading it. But you should mix up your play. You really should. But there's nothing better than the high of catching somebody. My best hand ever, which I haven't had many, and I've played a lot of them. I remember it was that time in Vegas. Like I just was like, this dude doesn't have it. I don't know why. I don't know. I just sensed it. It was a weird thing, and I pulled down a huge pot for it. Like there's no better high than just going, okay, this is this. I should do this. This is 3 plus 6. Like over 5. Listen, I'm all about math, man. You see my stuff, but it's. I guess it takes the purity out of it, but it's smarter. Like you can't. Every sport's going to be optimized, right? Every sport is going to be made better, and I'm all for that. But it's.
This is really you're exactly right. This has been the trend, right? Look at baseball and how statistics heavy baseball
Moneyball
is now, right? Moneyball, like in some ways. has made, the game is it's more efficient. Everybody's making these data-driven decisions. It is worse to watch than it's ever been because like nobody can score runs anymore, right? They're doing the shift and like they're changing pitchers every couple of minutes based on matchups. Like it's all this data driven analysis has in some ways ruined the game. Basketball is kind of undergoing a similar transition now too, where it's like it's all about 3-point shooting and it's all about like trying to get more attempts up than the other team, and it's still pretty enjoyable to watch, but it's like a completely different game now than it was 20 years ago. It's been really interesting to see.
And also too, I'm a big fan of the show ESPN FC. I listen to it almost every day. Big cast of characters, like a lot of Stevie Nicol, one of the best defenders for Liverpool, Craig Burley from Chelsea, Frank LaBeouf, World Cup winner for PSG, gigantic names. But they talk about when they played that, it's just beer and fish and chips and partying and snooker leagues and all of that. And they're like, today's players with their coaches and this and that. But then a lot of them say, like, what do you wish you did better in your career? And like, well, I wish I hadn't have ate 5 bags of crisps before a game. Like you're talking about the purity of the sport, right? You're talking about pitcher getting up there throwing 9 innings, like Kevin Costner throwing 9 innings. It's just, blood, sweat, and alcohol, booze, spitting. But then if you're a coach and you're like, all right, this guy coming up, he hits 478 against left-handed pitchers, and then he hits 133 against right-handed pitchers, and he's hot right now. I'm putting a right-hand pitcher in. Like you have to combine those things. And so I think sports science is important, but I know it's not rounders, but like you're saying with poker, like it's the evolution of the game. Yeah. And so, I mean, but you know what though, as much as we talk about that, there's still games going on right now with 4 dudes, 4 women, anybody, 4 people sitting around just betting like maniacs. So there's still some purity, I think, to it. And
sure.
I have a really important question for you. So I went online and I researched the 5 best-selling cookies on Amazon.Canada.ca, right?
Yeah.
The top 5. And I want to know, I'm going to read the 5 of them to you. 6. I'm going to do 6. And I want you to be, Phil, Lucky Charms, Briggs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I want you to pick your cookie for your tell. So I'm going to read them out to you.
Oh, man.
So
okay.
According to Amazon, the number 1 best-selling cookie in Canada right now is the Oreo mint cream sandwich cookie.
Okay.
Number 2 is the Hershey's Chip-Its, holiday-shaped baking chips, red stocking and green tree vanilla cream, Christmas candy, and they're on cookies. 3 is Chips Ahoy Chewy Cookies. 4 is Oreo Original Sandwich Cookies. 5 is Chips Ahoy Caramel. And number 6 is Christy Fudgio Original Cookie.
Do you know about Fudgios?
No, but
you guys have?
They look pretty amazing.
Yeah, so it's kind of like an Oreo, so it's chocolate, chocolate cookie on the outside, but it's like chocolate fudge in the middle. Kind of like the Oreo white stuff, like a similar texture, but more chocolatey, more fudgy. Delicious. Definitely brought Fudgios to school in my lunch a lot in grade school growing up. So, there's some history there. I think that the Oreo mint ones the very first one that you mentioned would be a strong contender as well. And I love an original Oreo. Those would be the top 3 out of the list that you read. If I picked, I think you said Mr. Christie there was like the 3rd or 4th one. And if I picked those, my wife would probably literally punch me in the face. She hates those cookies so much. It's like those compared to like a homemade chocolate chip cookie. It's just not, I don't need to just besmirch those cookies for anybody out there that likes them. But those are definitely at the bottom of the list there of what you just read off. Yeah, I'm gonna go with the Fudgios, man. Those are there's a nostalgia factor there too. Yeah, let's go with that. That would be a good like Canadian again, or if I'm like Lucky Charms, I'm trying to carve out my own version of Teddy KGB here with some of my own personal traits. I think me having Fudgios would be appropriate.
Oh, I love it. And
can we talk quickly though about how he eats the cookies? Like I actually have some logistical questions about the Oreos.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Like so first of all, so he listens to the cookie. He puts it up to his ear like it's a conch shell, and he's trying to hear the ocean. He then pulls it apart, eats the first half, and then eats the second half. Can we say that that's like a terrible way to eat Oreos, or is that how we do it?
That's how I do it.
That's how you do it?
Yeah, I tear it apart. I eat the the frosting first, or whatever's in the middle, the white stuff, as Weird Al would say, and then
Yeah.
I eat the 2 pieces of cookie. I do. It's like I break it up into 3 separate factions.
Right.
I can't think of the last time I just bit into an Oreo as a sandwich. I don't take my sandwiches when I go to a restaurant and eat them like that. You know, I'll eat my sandwich, but for an Oreo, twist, filling, cookie.
It's like each individual part is somehow greater than the sum of the parts. See, whereas like I just bite into those things. Like I might eat them in a single bite. That's how quickly I go through it. And that's the other big question. So does he, like, when we're looking at this tell, is he eating an Oreo every single hand of poker? Like if he's sitting down for like a 6-hour session, is he eating like 230 Oreos?
Yeah, that's a great point. But I think it looked like he has some used Oreos on his tray as well. So he has this odd situation. It's labeled. I think
It
it
says
only,
don't touch, right?
Yeah.
So nobody else is allowed to touch the Oreos.
which means people had touched it once.
Yeah.
Like
He had to make it clear that those were like they're his Oreos.
Frankie Four Fingers was Frankie Five Fingers before he touched KGB's
Yeah.
Oreos. You know what I
You
mean?
can't just leave them in those trays either. They're gonna get stale. Like, does he? You can't. Yeah, you gotta maybe like put them back in the package and seal them back up if you don't eat all of the Oreos during your poker game.
It's got to be a nervous tick. It's got to be when something means something. Because if you're just checking all day and he reads you, you read him, he's not cracking an Oreo. But I think when he gets pushed to the limit or he's trying to just mess with somebody, that's the tell. I think that's what it is. Like if he's doing that sports science if he's eating it every other round.
Right.
Like that's, so I think it's when it comes to like, remember at the end when Matt Damon catches it, he goes, like he kind of looks at the Oreo and you're like, but yeah, that was his tell though, because he's like, I could have played him all night. So I think he only does that for big hand when it matters. And yeah, that's just what I mean, I could be wrong, but you're not housing Oreos for 72 hours. Like that's the amount of sugar in your system. Unless you you have to keep eating, like you get that dopamine rush, I guess. You just have to keep eating them because if you stop, you're crashing. So I just thought it was a big hand. I thought like when things get nerve wracking, that's what he would do, if that makes sense. And so you want to know which cookie I would pick out of the 6?
Yeah, please.
All right, so I'm gonna get rid of every single one that I could develop a tell on. So these Chip-Its, I feel like I would break off the little chips on the top. With Chips Ahoy, I very rarely eat them in one bite. So maybe if I get nervous, I bite them a certain way and people can read how I eat it. Fudgios, they look delicious, but I feel like the sugar content would just like blow my head off. So I would probably go with the mint Oreos because you can eat them in one bite.
Yeah, that's a good choice.
Like I wouldn't twist, I wouldn't do anything. I would just take it and go plop. Like I wouldn't switch hands. You know what? I would switch hands. I would just kind of put them on both sides, just kind of eat Oreos in between during that. But yeah, I would do the mint Oreos because you can eat them all with one bite.
Yeah.
And I would alternate which side I'd chew on. So then people are, oh yeah, he chews on the right side when he has a hand, and he chews on the left side when he's flopping.
You'd be game theory optimal, like with your Oreos in there too. Like you'd vary your Oreo eating.
Yeah.
You know, to mask your player profile, by mixing up the way you eat your Oreos. I like it.
I went full limitless. I really did. When you were talking about this, I ran simulations in my head. So yeah, I went full game theory. I mean, that's how I make my money, man, is my research and the way I look at things. So yeah, I guess I am full on. You know, I think I would enjoy poker a lot more if I could game theory it, but not overly game theory it, like into oblivion.
Well, this is the thing, and it's part of what makes Rounders such a great movie, in that it is simultaneously this real, authentic poker movie that doesn't dumb it down, that it like isn't, you know, Royal Flush versus Four of a Kind, but at the same, like, so it's this incredible, beloved movie. It's an amazing story. Based on poker though, and the reality is that poker largely just sort of sitting there in a chair folding cards,
Yes,
waiting
exactly.
for a good hand, hour after hour. So the fact that it's both this like movie that is so authentic to poker, but also so good and so like exciting and not boring, is really quite a feat, because it captures the real essence of poker, but not in the sitting there for 5 hours just folding cards sense of the real part of poker.
And that's why the writers made the voiceover, because a lot of poker is just people staring at each other. So they had the voiceover because you have that running narration in your head. You are thinking, you are calculating. So by having the voiceover, it makes the poker more interesting because you're hearing Mike talk about what's going on in front of you, but that would be running in his head.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they did a good job of, not doing 48 royal flushes, but just playing it real, but also the voiceover that carries through. And also you have the gambling debt. I had to fast forward through the police thing because you're just watching Worm going, you idiot, you idiot, you idiot, you idiot. Like and then when they're gambling, they're having fun. Like, oh, you could tell the tells, and he's doing this. He's picking his nose, which means he has this, and we're raising the pot. Like, so they found like several different ways to make poker interesting. Which, like even the beginning when he pulls all the cash from everywhere, even though she knows he has the cash, but like he pulls the cash from all the places, you're like, oh, this guy shouldn't be doing this. So you get that sense against KGB. So I think they did a good job of varying up all the different poker games throughout. Mm-hmm. And like he even loses at that house. He's like, I just wasn't feeling it. I'm tired. So yeah, there's probably like 8 different ways that they played poker in the movie, which has to be like the hardest way to keep the movie interesting. But yeah, between the narration, the differences, the kind of, also inherently at the end, like, is Grandma going to kill him? Is KGB going to kill him? So you have that kind of specter over your head. You like Mike. Everyone likes Mike. And so I think that's what makes the poker interesting. That takes a lot of work though, man. Like you got to understand, making poker interesting is tough. And also too, I think this movie's so rewatchable because even though it's 2 hours, it's kind of long, but it's not like a Mississippi Grind where or leaving Las Vegas where you're just wallowing in alcoholism and depression and death and just these guys are losers, these guys are depressed. Like Mike's a good kid. Worm is messed up, but they explain Worm. You got Kanish, you got KGB, who's actually pretty good to his word. So I think this movie's pretty watchable. So it kind of bit off its own foot by making itself so believable, but also I think it made itself more watchable because it's not so sensationalistic. It's not wallowing in the muck. Does that make sense?
100%. There's some good ups and downs throughout, right? He it starts out, he loses his bankroll, then him and Worm, then we go, Worm gets introduced, we go into the scene of them running the scam together. And before that, we see him blind reading, all the judges' hands at the judges' game. And so there's some cool, some fun kind of adventure type scenes like that. Then him and his girlfriend break up. And Worm says that there ought to be a saying about women in the poker game of life, which that just cracks me up every time. I don't even know what that saying means exactly, but just the way that he delivers that line was so funny. And then they go back out, and Mike makes his, in the words of Joey Kanish, his alley-like return to the ring. Then they do the run where they go to the various games and start like building the bankroll pretty quickly, then obviously lose it all at the game with all of the cops, and then Mike has finishes on the high note of beating KGB. And so there's sort of like some great like ups and downs throughout. There's some fun parts where you can it's rewatchable. You can kind of turn it on at almost any point in the movie and enjoy. Like there's going to be some parts, some great scenes that you enjoy like coming up pretty quickly. It doesn't really drag, like even though it is 2 hours, it doesn't drag at all. The 2 hours flies by.
And like Worm, what's interesting about Worm though is he learned how to play the guards and he learned how to play the prisoners. So he knows how to survive in the world. So some of it, like they show these quite intelligent in prison. Like everyone liked him, and he has all these connections because of he knows how to like read people and play people. My one problem is he's very smart because he can understand poker in the prison, but then he goes out in the real world and he joins these games. Like it's kind of like, I don't know, maybe he's just there's like 4 different kinds of poker players here. You have Mike, who he's not going to be a jobber. He's not going to be a rounder. He wants to make a run, but he's going to do it smart. Then you have Worm, who will never make a run, have some highs, lows. He's not going to live long. Then you have Kanish, who's just like in the game, like pulling probably like 2-3 G's a month, 4 G's a month, just kind of playing, jobbing, working his truck. And then you have like a KGB who is like, I don't know, what is KGB? What kind of gambler is he? He's happy where he's at. I think he just likes taking other poker players' money. He's a predatory sort of player. Like he knows people are coming in, he takes their money. So it's pretty, I like the 4 different players involved in this world.
Yeah.
I don't know
What's
what point
interesting,
I had.
Teddy is like a gatekeeper in that world to a certain degree too, right? It's his
Yeah,
club. He can splash the pot if he wants. He's
splash the
running the
butt.
game, right? You've got to go to him to even get into the game, right?
Hmm.
And so there's an interesting element there. It's funny that you mentioned about the whole Worm in jail playing with the guards and playing with the other prisoners and that sort of thing. I read somewhere that apparently there were additional scenes filmed where like one of the guys that Worm rips off in prison gets out of prison and is going after Worm, and this all ended up on the cutting room floor. But there was this whole like, because I agree with you, like it's Worm's exit from the movie. It's like all of a sudden he's just gone. Like it's very sort of sudden, and I guess maybe part of that is that there were some additional Worm scenes later on that were cut out. He had a whole maybe additional plot with people coming after him and things like that. But I kind of like the way the story ends. It's like, yeah, I'm not coming with you this time. Like he finally has that sort of clean break to get away from this guy who's dragging him down. I don't know. I think yeah, Worm's brutal, but like his sort of arc throughout the story, I think it ends really well actually.
Because he pushed Mike so far. Like it wasn't about being a friend anymore. Like he was taking advantage of Mike. Like he is kind of like the devil on your shoulder for like just yeah. So they do give him a chance for a clean break. Absolutely. And you know who else they lost in this movie is Famke Johnson's character too. Like they really. Petra, she shows up. She was in a lot of the trailers. She doesn't show up. So there must be a lot on the floor. But I think in the end, though, the focus is Mike. And the focus is losing to KGB, coming back like an athlete. Like Rocky. This is like what, Rocky? Where he loses
Yeah.
to Apollo, then comes back and avenges his loss. And so it's like a sports movie, but with poker. And can we talk about one thing? The Ed Norton trying to eat noodles at the casino. He doesn't eat a single bite of his noodles. He just does the stupid thing in movies where people are like they sort of mess stuff around on the plate. Damon's eating, but Norton he's just moving his noodles the whole time. Like
I didn't even notice that. He does eat he gets a hot dog too. A lot of good eating scenes, I guess, in this movie. He
and
gets
also
the street meat at one point.
and Mike walks into a Turkish bath with shoes on. Like that's not very hygienic. It's like, come on, Mike. You could have taken your shoes off at least. I don't know if you know that.
And just opens the door and says to Joey, like, "Hey, come out," or something like
Yeah.
that. It's pretty startling if you're in your just relaxing at the Turkish bathhouse, and all of a sudden someone sticks their head in the door and asks you to come out. I don't know.
Fully dressed with shoes on. You're like, wait, what's happening here? But I'm so glad you recommended this movie. Like, I'm glad to go back and watch Norton. Like that thrill you had, like watching a Norton movie in the '90s. Like, I think for people like I can't speak for you, but Norton was a really interesting breath of fresh air in the late '90s. I think Primal Fear and American History X and Rounders and Fight Club. He was this sort of he wasn't what you were used to on screen, but he had this like really cool vibe about him. And it's always fun watching that and just like realizing how great he was. And yeah, Worm, man. Wow, man. You just want to headlock this dude. Oh, Worm is such a pain in the butt. Hey, real quick. So we got to, before we have more to talk about, I sent you a message earlier today, and you didn't have much time to do this, but let's say you and I are at a table, right? And we have to play poker. It's 7 people at a table.
Okay.
And it's you and I. We don't mind losing money. We're not working together. We're like, cool, like 1,000 each, whatever. And we're playing against 5 Russian characters from movies who are played by non-Russians who just use wild accents. Like we're talking, you hear it and you're going, what is happening to my life? So who would you want at this table to play against? Like it's us against 5, not Russians who are played by non-Russians. Like who would you want?
Yeah. So I tried to look at it's interesting. I was doing some research on this, googling bad Russian accents in movies, and a lot of the things that I came across was a lot of talk about Teddy KGB, which I thought was very unfortunate because I really do. I
It's
think
fun,
it's one of those.
man. Like,
It's fun. It's one of those like kind of so bad it's good. Like I just enjoy it and it's memorable and it's fun and I like saying the lines. So I don't hate the Teddy KGB accent at all. And then most of the other suggestions were maybe either movies I hadn't seen or just things that I didn't think were that great. So the two that really stood out for me just purely from my own memory. The first one is Enemy at the Gates, Jude Law, who is playing a Russian sniper named Vitaly with a full-on British accent the entire time.
yeah, yeah.
Like, it's not a bad Russian accent. It's a British accent for a guy who's supposed to be Russian.
It's Costner in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves.
Right?
Yeah, it's unlike other Robin Hoods. I speak with a British accent. But yeah, I remember watching that movie and I was kind of slightly confused. I'm like, is he Russian? Like, I know this is World War II. I know where the battle is. Like, I know about these battles. I actually read the book Enemy at the Gates. Like, what a great book.
It's a phenomenal movie.
Yeah.
So don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I am not bagging on Enemy at the Gates at all. But just the accent is just not there for Jude.
You're like, hey, Vitaly, how's it going? And then you hear his accent. You're like, wait.
Right, mate.
All right, who's the second person at this table? So we have a sniper. Who else we got?
So the other one that came to mind, actually, coincidentally, is Famke Janssen.
Yes, I have heard.
When she was a Bond girl in GoldenEye, I can't remember the character's name.
Xenia on the top.
On the top, there we go. It was one that stood out as being pretty bad, and a quick YouTube watch reminded me that yes, it is a pretty terrible accent. Which, to be fair, her she's doing a bit of a strange kind of accent in this movie as well. So I don't know. Famke maybe needed to lay off some of the voice work in and around this time. Not a great Russian accent in GoldenEye.
No more foreplay. Like, she's okay, I love it. So we have Xenia and we have Jude Law.
Yeah.
Okay, so Dolph Lundgren's played two famous Russians, but I'm gonna take his Red Scorpion character. I don't know if you've seen that movie, but yeah, like Dolph Lundgren plays. Let's see, I forget his name. You're gonna love it. He plays, oh gosh, I should know this. Oh, Nikolai Rodchenko. And so just watching the Swedish Giant just use that Russian accent. So we had to have Dolph in there.
Mm-hmm.
And also you got to have Yelena from Black Widow.
Mm-hmm.
So played by Florence Pugh. Like, she has a fun Russian accent. So we have Xenia, we have Famke Janssen, Florence Pugh, Dolph Lundgren, Jude Law. And we need one more player. Oh, man. So you have Mickey Rourke. You have Air Force One, Harrison Ford in K-19, The Widowmaker, and Liam Neeson. Let's see. You have Viggo Mortensen from Eastern Promises, but he's Viggo and his accent's pretty good. Cate Blanchett from the fourth Indiana Jones. You have Gennady from Limitless, who we talked about that. Chekhov.
Oh, yeah. Gennady, yeah.
Okay, so it's down to two for me. It's Les Andropov from Armageddon. The Russian cosmonaut, or
the cosmonaut. That's right.
Because he would be a blast to play with. But I'm gonna say, okay, let me research one thing here. I'm gonna take Yuri Boyka, played by Scott Adkins in the Undisputed movies. So he was the main antagonist in Undisputed 2, and then he appeared in 2 more. So I know I'm not doing Stormare, which is kind of insane, but I just want to have Scott Adkins as Boyka at the table doing his Russian accent. So I think I like our crew. Like, we have
a good crew.
We have a lot of wild Russian accents flying around, and one non-Russian accent.
Yeah, exactly.
But then you and I both have to be doing accents the entire time too.
Yeah, and we each have our cookies. You've got your mint Oreos. I've got my Fudgios. We're going for accents. We're trying to eat our cookies in a variety of different strange ways to throw people off. This is a wild poker game, man.
Someone's getting shot at this table. Yeah.
100%. And if someone, it's really transitioning to like full old style Western of like someone's getting a royal flush, someone else is getting, 4 of a kind aces, and Xenia is gonna, choke you with her legs like in GoldenEye.
Okay, so I'm thinking about who will win this. Dolph Lundgren, I think he's just, I'm out first. I think Florence Pugh is going to be out quick. Yelena, because she just doesn't care. I think Xenia on the top has better things to do. She'll blow it all. She'll go all in. I think Boyka, he's a fighter. He doesn't care about cards. So I see it coming down to Nikolai and
Vitaly the sniper.
yeah, because he the
He'll
focus.
just sit there all day.
Yeah.
He'll just sit there. I think Vitaly the sniper is a strong candidate, right? He's gonna sit there patiently waiting all day if he has to, up in the crow's nest. Guy's got patience.
He's winning that. Are you gonna hang in there? When do you think you're gonna last? I'm out first.
Yeah, once I run out of Fudgios and I start getting hungry, then I'm probably not gonna last too much longer after that.
And then come back 3 days later, like Nikolai and Jude Law are still staring at each other. But I think Jude Law is walking away from this with the victory. The sniper wins.
Yeah, I think that's a good call.
Ah, man, dude, this was fun. This was a fun movie to go back to and just read about the creation of it. Just this, I mean, the amount of people who signed on at the time, you could tell people just love their monologues. And watching Martin Landau has such a warm presence in this movie, and also the whole breakup angle is pretty interesting. Like, she just dumps him. She's like, listen, you got a bad hand, you lose it. And I get it. Like, the dude blew his 30,000. He was never sleeping. You could tell he loved poker more. He was kind of playing something he wasn't. Yeah, but they go at him hard though. I don't like the other law student people because his poker had never cost them anything. If you think, and so the first time that he kind of messes up, all of his fellow classmates are like, "Oh, you blew it, my guy. You're the worst, bro. Like, we're not ever gonna give you anything again. You're late." Like, he seems like a very upstanding man who works jobs, and so I don't know if I like his friends, man. They ditch him. They ditch him pretty quick.
They do, for sure. You know, it kind of blew my mind going back to this, that like I kind of forgot that this was Koppelman and Levian's first movie.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a big. Are you a Billions guy? Have you ever watched it?
No, I use the Paul Giamatti gifs a lot though, or gifs, whatever you call them.
Yeah.
That's about it. Is it worth watching?
Yeah, it's a good show. You know, again, it's had a really, really long run. So the first, I don't know, 4 seasons, let's say, are pretty dynamite, and then it starts to go downhill a little bit after that. But if you're into, you know, like the finance world at all, I mean, it's not it's again their style, where they just use all of the terms that are authentic to that world, and they've again, kind of like Rounders, created this world, and partially by like going in deep and talking to hedge fund managers and spending time with them for years and years and learning kind of all the inner workings. And they really, you know, bring what do I know about that world? But the world that they create is certainly really, really interesting, and they really don't dumb it down at all. So it's pretty cool from that perspective. But just amazing to see, like, you know, they've done a lot of cool stuff over the years, and I totally forgot that Rounders was sort of their big breakout, their first one.
I saw there was about 72 episodes of it, and I was like, if there was 30 episodes, I'd probably watch it, but 72, that just seems like a long watch. Like, should I do that, or should I just jump onto Succession and try to catch up to that?
Oh, that's the other one. Succession is, if I were to recommend one of the, I probably honestly would recommend, like, Billions is now kind of, because it's petering out to a certain degree, like Damian Lewis, like, spoiler alert, like, isn't in every season. And so without him, like, his performance as Bobby Axelrod, the main character, and Giamatti as well, it really is about them kind of going mano a mano for the first, like, bunch of seasons. So when that's going on, it's pretty incredible, and I would say the high points of Billions are probably better than anything that Succession has done so far. But Succession is just so consistently good as well, and is still kind of peaking. Like, I think the 4th season is in production right now, and so it hasn't really leveled off yet. We're still kind of going up the mountain with Succession. So that's kind of the difference there. Both great though, man. I would really recommend checking them both out.
I need to. And before we get on, I just want to read some of the stuff that John Dahl has worked on. So he's done 4 episodes of Yellowstone, 4 episodes of Billions, 11 episodes of Ray Donovan, 2 episodes of For All Mankind, 1 episode of The Walking Dead. He did 2 episodes of Iron Fist, 1 episode of Jessica Jones, 2 episodes of Hannibal, 6 episodes of Justified, 2 episodes of House of Cards, 3 episodes of The Bridge, 1 of The Strain, 2 episodes of Outlander, 10 episodes of Californication. He did 2 episodes of The Americans, 16 episodes of Dexter, 4 episodes of The Vampire Diaries, 1 episode of Arrow, 1 episode of Homeland. Let's see. He also did Terriers 1 episode. He did 4 episodes of True Blood, 2 episodes of United States of Terror, 1 episode of Breaking Bad, 1 episode of Battlestar Galactica, 1 episode of Life. Hey, Damian Lewis. This is 2 episodes of Tilt, and then he got started by doing Kool and the Gang music videos.
Which Tilt is like a bunch of those in there. Billions and Tilt are Koppelman and Levian as well. So that partnership has continued a little bit since Rounders, which is kind of cool.
And I want to give Dahl props too for Red Rock West, Nicolas Cage, The Last Seduction, Linda Fiorentino, and Joyride. Like Joyride's a really good sort of white knuckle thriller. Like and it's mean too. So this dude did some good TV work, and I think he did The Great Raid, which didn't do well, but then he just transitioned into directing every single TV episode you could imagine. So this guy's a pro. Like, and this movie's very relaxed, and even the cinematographer. I was looking up the cinematographer for this, and I know we got to get out here. This episode's running long, but I was looking at his movies that he shot, and he shot a movie called Gummo, which is one of the most unsettling films, like kind of during the Larry Clark, Harmony Korine era. But that movie Gummo is so messed up. But he did Gummo, he did Rounders. Let me pull up one more movie. He had the strangest run that I think I've ever seen of a DP.
That movie's not about Tyler Gummo, is it?
I don't even want to talk about it. It's just a weird movie, dude. Like The Box. Just type in The Box. It's just gross. And but he also shot 1 Hour Photo. He's a Mark Romanek guy. He also shot the Johnny Cash Hurt video. But yeah, he let's see, what did he work on? He did Rounders. He had he had Gummo, Good Will Hunting, Rounders. Those were the 3 movies that, like, his run. That's like one of the weirdest run that I could possibly think about. Gummo, Good Will Hunting, and Rounders. But that's such a strange thing to work on. But yeah, I kind of like this
Must
dude.
Have been the Damon connection though, from Good Will Hunting.
Yeah, it must have been. I mean, he took him over. I mean, Damon was big. And like this movie shot, I mean, listen, it's tough getting, I mean, we didn't talk about this enough but the cinematography of making poker interesting, that's tough. Like you can make football interesting, but like the angles they found, I really like the warm lighting and spots. Like I loved when they stepped into the kind of play with the cops, how sort of fluorescently lit it is. When you go into the house, like the rich houses, you see the wealth. They shot a lot on location, and you can tell that not many sets were built. But I think, it wasn't an expensive movie to make. It was like $12 million or so. But I liked the on location shoots. It made it feel much more authentic. But I dug the lamp work. I liked when they knew when to get into warm lights, and then when they step into the bright lights of the casino. It's a really cool contrast of all these different places. So yeah, we got to give the cinematography, some props as well before we get out of here.
For sure. And it's things like that again, it's like little details in a $12 million movie that are memorable and make it great, for sure. I noticed like even the scene in the gym, the basketball scene that you were referencing earlier.
Oh yeah.
It's really cool, like bright kind of yellow, like a real yellow hue to it. Just really like a really unique look. And so many of the different settings, like that's really what stands out. Is just the way that they're lit. Very, very unique. And as sort of I'm trying to say unique New York, like I'm Ron Burgundy. As a New York movie, it's kind of an interesting way to shoot it. It looks like a very sort of different New York than what you typically see.
And that's a great point too, because if you think about maybe Abel Ferrara doing Bad Lieutenant, that movie is dirty and it's just gross. I mean, completely different subject matter. But you could have shot this a lot dingier. You could have shot this a lot more decrepit. But they definitely didn't do that. I think they gave it a totally different sort of sheen to New York. And yeah, you're right. I appreciate that. You don't see that much. Like they didn't glamorize it, but I don't think they made it look like an absolute hellhole, which is nice. But yeah, man, dude, thanks again for promoting this. This was cool. This was not promoting or like recommending this that we talk about. So yeah, man, this was awesome. So thanks for joining me.
It's my pleasure, man. This is one of my favorites of all time. Such a fun movie to rewatch. So if anybody other hasn't seen it and you made it all this way, go check it out or go rewatch it because it really does hold up. And it was just super fun to rewatch again and really great chatting with you about it.
Again, we'll look at the list and we'll see what we got to talk about next because we got some good ones coming up. But thank you for joining me, man.
My pleasure. Anytime.
All right. So for Mark, DBS, and for Phil, Lucky Charms with the Z Briggs, this is Movies, Films, and Flicks. We'll see you next week.